Let's draw this mobile phone holder then. This is the default screen when you try and make a new document. You can choose a range of templates. These are my recent templates. If you haven't got any in this list, you can choose A4 from the Print tab. Let's go for this one. You can change portrait versus landscape. I'm going to go with landscape, or you can enter whatever size you like in these boxes here. I'm going to click create. If you need to make your artboards any bigger or smaller at any time, that's absolutely fine. You can go to the properties menu up here, the properties tab, click on edit artboards, and then you can make your artboards bigger or smaller. When you're done, just press exit. We're going to make sure the document is set up in a particular way for this tutorial. We're going to have, under the layers tab, we're going to have 2 layers on this design, and the thing I'm aiming to replicate for you today is to show you how to do something like this. I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put this, I'm going to call this layer template, and then I'm going to create an additional layer down here. I'm going to call that design. The reason why we're going to have 2 layers is so we can lay out the design in sections. So you can see there's a kind of rectangular shape here, and there's another rectangular shape here. We're going to create some boxes to start off with, to put that nice aesthetic shape into. A couple of things we're going to make sure to set up the document. We've got our layers, and we're going to be working on the template layer first. We're going to make sure that our grid is on, so view show grid. We're also going to make sure that snap to grid is on under view snap to grid. I'm going to double check the size of my squares by going to edit preferences guides and grid. That's going to be a different location if you are on a Mac, and this is showing that I've got a grid line. If you look at under guides and grid, we've got a grid line every 10 millimeters, which is 1 centimeter, and we've got 10 subdivisions. So our small squares, we're going to have 10 of those, 10 small squares in every one big square. 10 divided by 10 is 1. So if we look here, if I zoom in, I draw some squares. One of those big squares is 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters. One of these small squares is 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. So let's zoom out. Okay, you'll need to use the dimensions from your own template that you've drawn, but I know for a fact that this square here, this rectangle, is 100 millimeters by 50 millimeters. A couple of ways we can do that. I'm going to use the rectangle tool, shortcut M, and then I could click and drag until I get roughly something that's the right size. That's an okay way to do it, but it can be quite difficult to find the right size. So instead, the other way you can do it is you can click in the top left hand corner of where you want your rectangle to start, just single click this time, and then you can literally just enter the dimensions of your rectangle. So I know it's going to be 100, and I know the height is going to be 50, and there is a rectangle the exact size I want it. Let's do another one. Switch back to the rectangle tool, click there, and let's do, this time it's going to be 70 by 50. So again, you need to put in the layout and the template of your own design. So my real design I'm going to do in black, so it doesn't really make sense to have my template in black as well. So let's highlight these 2 squares, these 2 rectangles, go to the properties tab and change the stroke from black to pretty much anything else apart from black and red, because we're going to use those for cut and engrave. So I'm going to choose this blue and try and work with the thinnest stroke possible. Just looks really cleaner. You can get a more precise kind of idea of how your design's going to look. So 0.25 point stroke is good. That's all I need on the template layer. I don't need any other details at the moment because it's just a guide. So going back to the Layers tab, I'm now going to lock this layer. There's a kind of empty space here. You see the padlock now appears. That means that I can't, when actually drawing my design, I can't accidentally select or move these or drag them out of position. Let's now move on to the design layer. And there's one final thing I'm going to do to make sure that my document is set up properly, and that's I kind of want a center line running down the center of my design. And the way to add that is I'm going to go to View, Rulers, Show Rulers. I get these rulers up here, and I'm going to go to View, Guides. It's displaying Hide Guides, which means that my guides are already active, so I don't need to do anything. But now if I click and drag in the top ruler, you can see I'm dragging down this imaginary line. If I find the midpoint in my design, which looks like it's there, you have to make sure it's the midpoint, otherwise there's no point, and drop it. And I've got this construction line. This construction line won't actually appear when I laser cut, it's just to help guide me. And now I'm ready to start drawing out my design. So all of these lines here, they're going to be drawn out pretty quickly. What I'm going to do for it is I'm not going to add any of these curves to start off with. I'm just going to do straight lines and then add the curves afterwards. I'm going to do that using the pen tool. Shortcut is P. And if you look at where I'm going to start this kind of in the middle here at this point here. So I'm going to start, let's zoom in a little bit. This is there, that's a bit better. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to say, okay, that's about 1.5, 1 square up. It comes out a little bit, it's not quite straight. Comes up to the outer bit here. Let's move down a little bit. That's lasts for about 1 square. Comes in by about half a square. Goes along. And then at about here it comes back out again. It goes along. I'm going to place an anchor point here. This point corresponds to this point over here. It's about a square. Again, you'll need to count and measure based on your own prototype. This one comes in to about here. Comes out to about here. Goes to about there. About there. About yeah, that looks about right. And then into the center here. Okay, so hit escape to end the path. The only thing I'm not happy about is these lines, these two lines here aren't very parallel, and I don't really like that. Something's going to go wrong when I deselect this path, because you'll see the stroke at the moment, the line color is no line color. So if I click off it and I unselect it, it looks like it's disappeared. It hasn't. If I highlight where I know the path is, it comes back, and we know we want our actual path to be black. So let's put that in. It's assigned it a horribly thick stroke, so let's change that back to a nice thin stroke. So the thing I want to adjust is I want to make these lines parallel. Now, the overall shape of the path is correct. It's just in the place of an anchor point that I need to change. So if I'm altering anchor points, I need to use the direct selection tool, which is the grey arrow, not the black arrow. The shortcut for the direct selection tool being A. Activate that, and I can see all the individual anchor points where I clicked. And I know I want this point to end on my center line, so it's this one that I need to adjust. And I can literally just select it on its own, click on it, and then press down on my down arrow until I have two parallel-ish lines. That looks about right. Okay, so now I've done that, now that I've done that, you might be wondering how I'm going to get this nicer rounded shape. So the way I do that is again with the direct selection tool. Let's click on one of these anchor points, and you can see next to it comes up this little circle, and that'll allow me to, well, it shows you kind of what it does in a little preview. If I click and drag this, I can drag that out to what I want it to be. I can start making adjustments based on what I want it to look like. So I'm just going to do this as quickly as possible. That looks about right. And now we've got half of the design. So what I want to do is I actually want to copy and paste this and mirror it about this center line here. So if I select my path with the selection tool, that's V this time, the black arrow, select my path, and I can go to Object, Transform, Reflect. If you look at the arrows, you can tell that I want to reflect it about the horizontal axis. If I were to click the OK button, it would just flip this path and not copy it. So I actually want to click the copy button instead. So there's my path. It's exactly as I want it, except it's in the wrong place. So I can just hit the down arrow, or I can drag it with the mouse until it is in the correct location. And there we go. So there's a few more things that I need to do before this is ready. One of which is add this fold line in my design. I also need to add the section for where the phone is going to sit. So back to the pen tool. I can just click once and click again where that fold line should be. Hit escape to end the path. Select my path. Go to the properties menu. Change it to a red stroke. So I would advise, you can in theory use any color for the laser cutter, but for the purposes of my sanity, let's all use black for cut and this red for engrave. So we want this line to be engraved so it can be folded. Okay, so let's put in this section here. So back to the pen tool. I know I'm going to start at my center line again. Let's choose a black stroke. Let's go up. Let's go to here. Let's go up to about there. Let's go down a bit. Let's go in. And let's go back to the center line. Predictably, we're going to do the same process as before. We're going to select the path. We're going to Object, Transform, Reflect. We're going to be reflecting again about the horizontal. We're going to be copying. Oh, that's gone a bit wrong. Let's try again. Make sure when you do that, you use the selection tool, select the path. I've only had part of that selected. So let's go reflect again and go copy. There we go. Occupying the same physical space. Let's move it down until it's in the correct location. And let's go ahead and add some of these curves to them. So that's going to have a curve, that's going to have a curve, that's going to have a small curve. Same down here. See if I can get them to look the same. If you want it perfect accuracy and that appeals to the perfectionist in you, you can type in the radius of the corner you want in here to get them all exactly the same. And this corners panel under the properties menu. Let's do that. And then we only have one more thing to fix, and that's the fact that this line needs to be red. And at the moment it's part of two different lines and both of them are black. The way we're going to do that is with the scissors tool. The shortcut is C. It's also located underneath the eraser tool. And what that does, it's going to cut a path and make it into two paths. So I can click there, that's where I want to cut it. I can click here, that's also where I want to cut the other one. If I use the selection tool now, you can see that that's a path on its own, and that's a path on its own. So let's select them, deselect my guide, and then change them to my engrave color. And there we go. That's a pretty good job of duplicating the thing that I want to laser cut. I go back to the layers tab, and now before I would send this to the laser cutter, I might want to make the template layer invisible. Okay, and I can delete my guide, and there is my design ready to be saved to the correct Google Drive folder so that it can be laser cut. And good luck with your own.